Greetings and welcome. Now, I've been watching a lot of Opeth album ranking videos on YouTube recently. There's hundreds out there. Opeth albums ranked worst to best, Opeth tier list. There's loads of them out there, and I find them fascinating because Opeth is one of those bands that are so unique. They have so many different eras of music, so many different sounds, so many different aspects that people enjoy more than others. So it always makes for an interesting ranking video. So I'm going to shamelessly steal all their ideas and do one myself. Now, I love Opeth. I adore Opeth. Top 5 favourite bands easily. I assume you do too. I mean, you've tuned into the video. If you don't like Opeth, what you doing? Go. But that's what makes these videos so interesting, because I think it's more a case of which era of Opeth do you enjoy the most. I have seen some ranking videos where people have sort of broke the mould of the eras. I saw one guy that had Sorceress as his favourite album, then Black Water Park second. I pretty much stick to the standard eras of Opeth and which ones blocked I enjoy more. But let's get into it. Now, I'm going to make it clear straight away, Opeth don't make bad music. They just don't. There isn't bad albums. There's not one of these albums you'll put on and I'll go, oh god. There isn't a Scent Anger equivalent with Opeth, and that's reflected in my tier list categories here. As you can see, it goes from good, really good, amazing, incredible, masterpiece, and each one of those categories represent the different eras of Opeth. Now, you may disagree with me. You can put down in the comments, but I class the different eras of Opeth as the first two albums, Orchid, Morning Rise, definitely more rooted in death metal, very dark, even verging on black metal. There's hints of the Opeth to come, the more progressive nature, but they're definitely more rooted in death metal. The next era I class as the next 3 albums, My Arms, Your Hearse, Still Life, Blackwater Park, which are still dark, but definitely more progressive elements. I class them sort of progressive death metal. Deliverance, Damnation, I kind of class as a category on their own. I kind of see them like the And Justice for All album from Metallica, where it's not quite the same as what came before, but it's still not the same as the Black album that came afterwards. I kind of class them on their own. And then you've got Ghost Reveries and Watershed, which are still heavy, still have the growls, the metal growls, but musically definitely more going towards prog rock, I think, with those 2 albums. And then you've got the later era, which is just pure prog rock. I'm not going to fanny about too much, otherwise I'll be here forever. I'm going to go straight into it. Now, straight away, you're going to see which era of Opeth is my least favourite. And something has to come at 13th. And like I say, it doesn't mean it's bad. It's just, it's last. And it's Pale Communion. So yeah, this era of Opeth is probably it is my least favourite era of Opeth. I'm not huge on prog rock. You know, I was never a massive Yes fan or anything like that. It was difficult to rank these specific albums in the later era, so it's mainly just on which albums have the more songs that I like the most out of, and that's what I feel. This is what I feel with these later Opeth albums, is that there's generally only sort of 3-4 tracks that I really like on them. But I'm happy with that. I come to terms with that. That happens with a lot of bands. I find it with Mastodon and Metallica, their later albums. Mastodon's last album only really had sort of 3-4 tracks on it that I really liked, but those 3-4 tracks were bangers. Metallica's most recent albums, you know, same thing. There's a lot of songs on the albums that I don't really enjoy, but there's bangers on there. Moth to the Flame, Lex Eterna, you know, there's some absolute bangers. And I get the same thing with Opeth. So Pale Communion, there's only really a couple of songs. I'm going to go next up with Kaldvernum. You know what I'm talking about. It's in Swedish, their most recent release. I say with these albums, there's great songs on there, but I do just find that the best way to describe it is they get a bit too wanky for me. Now, when I say wanky, I'm British. If you're not British, there's too extended keyboard solos and songs that go on too long. Like there's songs on here that I love, but then there's like a 2-minute long sort of piano interlude at the end, and I'll be honest, I just get a bit bored. I get a bit bored. Opeth are one of those bands that were always fantastic at doing repetition and keeping it interesting. You know, you think Deliverance is an obvious example. The end of Deliverance with the riff and the drums are doing things, they keep it interesting. But also tracks like The More on Still Life and some tracks off some of the other albums where You know, you think of the intro where it's just that da-na-na-na-na-na-na. It goes on for about 1-2 minutes, but they always manage to keep it interesting, that repetition with different drum parts and the building up and the tension. I just don't get it with these later albums, the extended keyboard solos. I find them a little bit boring. But like I say, you put on any of these albums, I will enjoy it. I won't tell you to turn it off. I'll enjoy them. Opeth don't do bad music. Next up for me, it's Sorceress. The track Sorceress alone probably enters my top 10 favourite Opeth tracks. I love that track. I love seeing it live. When I saw them live, Download, I think, they start off with the piano part, and then the rest of the band come out, and they've got that interesting. Opeth generally stay true to the standard tuning, but on this track they tune down to an A, and you get that riff. Oh, so heavy for a sort of prog rocky song. That riff is heavy, and I love it. Absolutely love it. Yeah, so that track alone pushes Sorceress up the list of these ones, and then of course it's Heritage. The sort of first 5 tracks on this album I really love. The beginning of this album I enjoy. I find it peters off near the end. I remember this album came out, I was working night shifts at the time, so it did have quite a heavy rotation, but it's a great album. Another thing I do like about the Heritage album is the artwork. You could not get a better representation of the message that Opeth are trying to convey in this album art for Heritage, where they've got the past of the dark side of Opeth, the evil underground, and it's now blossoming into a beautiful tree. And there's been a few band members that have fallen off the tree, that have had to, be discarded from this era of Opeth, but they're producing, and it's not like the darkness was rubbish before. I think it's represented and it's evil, and it has its place, but now it's into this beautiful tree. But yeah, overall, this era of Opeth, I won't find myself putting these albums on too often. I generally have the songs that I like from that album in a playlist or on my like playlist, and I'll listen to them, but it will be very rare that I will listen to the entire album. I have been listening to the entire albums to do this tier list. I've been doing a mammoth session in the van, listening to all the albums when I've been driving long distance, so I have, for the first time in a long time, listened to these albums all the way through. But yeah, I tend to just pick and choose tracks from these albums. So next up, the next era of Opeth, and it's the Watershed. A lot of people have this as their favourite Opeth album, and I understand why. This is the thing with opinions and art. This is what's interesting about it. Just different people enjoy different aspects of Opeth, and these albums for me, like I said, they are more going towards the era of Opeth that I'm probably not quite as keen on. They're still heavy in parts, of course, and they still have absolutely banging tracks. I mean, Watershed, Porcelain Heart, Lotus Eater. It's got some incredible songs on, incredible, and it's a great album. It's a great album, but it's just about eras. This era, they are. I often find with this album in particular, Watershed, that Michael Apfel is really probably coming to the end of his tether with the growling vocals. I think he really wants to give them up, but doesn't quite for that album, and keeps them going, and it kind of feels like it's a bit forced. But they're disappearing anyway. Next up, Ghost Reveries. Incredible album. Absolutely brilliant album. Ghost Reveries. I remember when this album came out. It's got some fantastic Opeth tracks on there. But just the same as Watershed. They're definitely going towards the more wanky era of Opeth, with maybe aspects of the album are not quite as interesting, and songs maybe go on a little bit too long with extended keyboard solos. It's not my favourite, but it's got banging tracks on there. Next up we have Orchid. I might as well chuck it in. You know what's going to happen. I've told you about the eras. Orchid and Morning Rise, so I need to do that, don't I? It's hard to differentiate between the. I guess Morning Rise just has slightly more tracks that I enjoy more, but I love dark Opeth. I love evil dark Opeth. And you know, these albums are more or less black metal, but then they've definitely got prog influences. And I love the bass on both these albums. The bass is incredible. Who was the bass player back then? It was Jonah DeFarfalla. Yeah, so they changed bass player to Martin, wasn't it? Martin Mendez for the later albums. But his bass playing is absolutely incredible. I think Michael might have played bass on, was it My Arms Your Hearse or something? I don't know. But yeah, great evil, really evil. I love Opeth when they're evil, and of course, Morning Rise just goes above Orchid for the 20-minute long epic Black Rose Eternal. Then next up, like I say, we had this. I don't know whether you guys agree with me, but this little interlude for Opeth where we have Damnation. This album is epic. It's incredible. It's dark, but then acoustic. Window Pane, oh, what an incredible song. But I really do have to be in the right mind frame to listen to this album because it is quite depressing. But it is a masterpiece, although it's not in the masterpiece section quite yet, but it's incredible. Window Pane alone is absolutely amazing. And then Deliverance. So it's weird, you know. A lot of people say Deliverance is their heaviest album, but then it hasn't got the darkness and the rawness of the earlier albums. But and then it has interesting gaps in the middle where it does get quite acoustic. And but you know, Master Apprentice and Deliverance, the tracks alone, absolutely epic. Master Apprentice will always be fond in my memory for I was lucky enough to go and see them at Shepherd's Bush, where they'd done the 2-hour set where they played an hour of basically Damnation. They played Harvest from Blackwater Park as well, but light acoustic set for an hour, and then they came back for the heavy set and they started with Master Apprentice, that riff, down now, bum 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 bum. It was like the whole place erupted. You know, that back then, that was before everyone was just standing there with their phones. You know, everyone got active back then. But yeah, that song Master Apprentice will always stick with me for that live gig. That was an incredible gig. Definitely the best time I saw Opeth. Okay, now we're on to the masterpieces, the 3 albums that I consider pure masterpieces. I love these albums from start to finish. There is no filler. There is nothing in these albums that shouldn't be there. Every single melody, chorus, guitar solo, riff, and oh my god, there are riffs. There are riffs. Everything is there for a purpose and is beautiful and a masterpiece from start to finish. Now, I like to define this era as the Peter Lindgren and Martin Lopez era. I think this is, I mean, I don't know how much influence Peter had as a guitar player. I know Michael Eckerfeldt is the orchestrator of Opeth, but I definitely found a massive difference in sound after he left. And Martin Lopez on the drums is a phenomenal drummer. He's incredible. I mean, these guys, they played on Deliverance, Damnation, Ghost Reveries, but these 3 albums for me are their pinnacle. I was introduced to this band through, actually a Metal Hammer CD that had the Drapery Falls on from Blackwater Park. It didn't have the full track. Metal Hammer CD had about 13 tracks it needed to put on. It just had the lighter section, and I adored it. I thought it was the most amazing thing I've ever heard. So I went straight out to HMV and bought Still Life. Because they didn't have Blackwater Park. But I was not disappointed. So my third choice then out of these 3 will be Blackwater Park. This is most people's favourite album. And I completely understand why. It's an incredible album. I guess probably the only reason it's third for me is maybe it might be slightly overplayed. I think I may have overplayed this album a bit too much, but it's still gold. It's still phenomenal. The riffs, and it's still dark. You know, I said earlier, I love Opeth when they're dark, and these 3 albums still have that dark element, but they have the amazing, beautiful prog side of Opeth as well, and amazing melodies and amazing choruses, incredible riffs. But yeah, maybe this album's a bit more overplayed for me, why it's a little bit further down, but still incredible. And I think also these 2 albums that I'm going to bring up next take on another level for me since I found out the concept albums. They're both concept albums, and I've never really been one for concept albums. I've never really been one for lyrics and understanding the lyrics. Vocals have always just been like another instrument for me. They've been beautiful, melodic, choruses, but it's always, I've never really cared about lyrics, but since finding out the concepts of these albums, when I listen to them now, they do take on another level. So next up is, well, you're going to find out what my favourite Opeth album is, but next up is My Arms, Your Hers. Stick it there. This album is an incredible album. It still has the real raw darkness from the original first two albums, but it's the perfect segue where they're starting to really show their true colours, Opeth, and really experiment with their sound. But they still got the darkness in this album. And if you don't know the concept, I'll explain the concept of the album. So it starts off with a song Prologue, where you've got rain pouring down, and the protagonist is actually at that moment looking down on his own funeral and watching his lover grieve for him. And the story continues that he's in the spirit world and he's constantly looking down on his lover, mourning his death. But time doesn't take the same form in the spirit world as it does in life, and he can't quite understand why she's not mourning his death anymore. It seems to be going too quickly. She's getting over it. He has guilt and revenge, and thinks that she's taking on another lover and gets quite spiteful. He doesn't understand how he can deal with this. He contemplates maybe killing her and bringing her to the spirit world as well. This is represented in the track When, in the beautiful chorus in the track When. Why can't I take you from this place? It's him trying to figure out how he can kill her and bring her to the spirit world, and then he takes on a demonic form in Demon of the Fall and basically appears in front of her, and she's petrified, and then he has feelings of guilt afterwards, and eventually comes to peace and leaves the spirit world into whichever place he goes to later on. But the story is epic. It's incredible. Now whenever I listen to that album, I listen to that story now, and it does take the album another level for me. But musically, everything else, it's still there second, even without the concept. So of course, Still Life, number one. The very first Opeth album I ever bought. Like I say, I don't know whether that has any relevance. We know what nostalgia does for music. You know, it takes you back to your youth, and all these albums. Still Life, as soon as I hear Still Life, it takes me back to smoking weed with my friend in my bedroom. You're always going to have nostalgia for those albums in your youth, and I guess that plays a part. But Still Life, it's a beautiful album. You're getting a lot more melodic parts now. You're getting whole tracks that are melodic in the middle of the album. But the opener, the tension that builds in that intro, like I mentioned before, and it builds up to the crushing evil riffs, and another fantastic concept. When I found out, if you don't know, the concept is about a sort of medieval village that's very heavily in Christianity, and the protagonist loses his faith, I guess becomes an atheist, and he's banished from the village, but he had a lover that he loved dearly, and he's banished for years. But he decides to try and come back and convince his lover to leave as well. The opening track, The Moor, is him sort of trekking through the moors and contemplating what he's going to say and do. And then when he finally gets there, he sees Belinda and tries to convince her to leave. Let's actually check out some of the lyrics. Godhead Laminate, one of my favourite tracks on the album. The guitar solo is incredible. I think Opeth could learn a lot of lessons from some of this earlier work. We don't have to have epic 10-minute long keyboard solos, and the solo in this track is to the point but so beautiful. And like I say, when you know the concept, in this track he finally meets Belinda, searching my way to perplexion, in crumbling faith I saw her. The chorus is incredible, and it does take on another level when you finally find out the concept. So he meets up with Belinda, he tries to convince her to leave, she doesn't, and eventually he does, and they go on the run, but they get caught. She specifically gets caught, and then she gets mobbed and hung, and that's when he goes on a just Serenity painted death murderous surge, and just murders the whole village. It's incredible, and probably I can't, it's always hard to just pick one favourite album of all time. But if someone had to put a gun against my head and say, you can take one album with you for the rest of your life and no other, it would probably be Still Life by Opeth. Absolutely adore that album. If you enjoyed the video, click a like, subscribe if you haven't subscribed. I'm going to do a few more of these videos. Obviously, my main channel, if you don't know, is a political channel where I do the majority of my videos, majority of my YouTube work. But it can get a bit heavy sometimes, so why not come and do some videos about some good heavy shit? Please comment down below. Do you agree with my list? Do you agree with my different eras of Opeth? Let me know. Take care.